I hope you guys had a good lunch. If somebody's sleepy, I really wholeheartedly recommend the coffee at Allegro, both because it's so much better than the other coffee. My name is Andrzej. I work in eBay. I live in London, so I can sometimes be seen. Well, come in if you are interested. I won't be offended if you then decide that the talk is not really for you. I live in London, work for eBay. I will build distributed systems there. That's probably the easiest explanation because, as you can imagine, eBay is a very complex beast. So the amount of things that you need to do to get anything done is a bit sometimes too much, sometimes less, but still, it's complex. I have a Twitter, I have an email. I will be very happy if you have any feedback, face-to-face or digitally, any way you prefer. Some things that you might know me from are, well, there is a conference called GeekOn that I organized. I was involved in Software Craftsmanship Kraków. That's a bit harder to do when you are in London. I also founded the Kraków Hadoop user group, which is now called, I think, Data KRK, and I am one of the leaders of the Polish Java user group. You could describe me as a developer going deeper. So I started developing when I was, well, a couple years old, and then I started, well, okay, how does it work? How does it work? What's under that? What's under that? And so I am here while talking to you. Of course, we have to start with a motivational slide. This is very personal. I'm extremely afraid that one day I will be the most stupid person on the planet. That will be a very good thing because the rest of people will be smarter, but it's a fear of mine. So I try to learn and dig stuff up and, well, not become that stupidest person just yet. So, Java. Who here uses Java in some form? Touches, manages, operates, hates because somebody else writes it. Java, as you probably know, has a way of doing everything in their, well, very special way. So, somebody says that, well, if Java had true garbage collection, most programs would delete themselves. Yes, but this is not a talk about programming here. If you're sleepy, if you want to take just one thing from this talk, please enable GC logging. The rest, when you can watch the video and see all the other tools I will show. If nothing, try to enable at least GC logging, and that might save you. Who here has GC logging enabled in their production applications? 5, 6, 7 hands. That's not too many. There is a saying that every problem becomes completely new when you add in Java. It's a bold statement, but well, there is certain truth to that because Java was developed at a campus that was remote from the other parts of Sun, which means they have their counterparts of most processes that you would normally expect to work with the operating system. So Java C instead of GCC, of course, and Java is known to be verbose. But that's not really that important. If you're a programmer, if you're curious what Java C produces, Java P is the tool to look at that. But who is a developer here? Who is a DevOps, an Ops, or a sysadmin? So there is at least 10 people who are afraid to raise their hands, or their title is something different. Doesn't really matter. This is something that you can look at if you're a developer. And now we'll try to go here, and we'll try to go here, and I don't think that's important. Half of the. Okay, we'll go from there. I just cannot do clear too often. So what I have here is a class file, and you give it to Java P, and yay, you can get information about what's in there, but it's not really ideal. Okay, some last-minute tweaks. Okay, that will be better. So with Java P, you can read exactly what is inside a class file. So you can see the bytecode. If you're a developer, if you're curious what Java C produces, well, this is what's there. There is nothing else, and that might be useful. Why that might be useful? Because if somebody was very smart and put a static final string or some other static value in your class and compiled them and shipped them over, and or something doesn't really work in production the way you would expect because the class is in a correct version, but something misbehaves, sometimes it might be needed for you to just look at the class file and, okay, show me what's inside because I don't believe you're behaving properly. Moving on. Of course, some people say Java is portable. Some software, some people write are as portable as the computer it's being written on. Of course, shipping laptop to data center is not really a viable option in most of cases. I've seen a couple data centers in which applications have been deployed using, let's say, no, those weren't laptops, those were iMacs, the small Macs, because the only working piece of code was actually on somebody's iMac, so it has been actually physically shipped to the data center and made to run. That's not where we want to go. So when you have a Java application out there and things go haywire, go wrong, how do you first check if Java is running? Well, you know PS, that's what a normal person would do. You can do top, you can do htop, you can, well, do whatever, something similar, and you will see a lot of lengthy things. Well, that's what PS produces. So you can see Java, it's in there, it's in the red. Don't worry about about all the text content, it's not really that important. But Java, of course, has its own version of PS because your normal PS wouldn't be enough. So instead of PS, you can do JPS, and you can get all Java-specific flags, all Java, well, I can speak about that, and I can also show that, so that will be probably better. By default, JPS will tell you what Java processes are running in the system. And I have IntelliJ, so we will use it as our victim. And of course, -- help here doesn't work, which illustrates what I wanted to stress, that some Java tools have a slightly different convention to them than the tools that you would be used to. So, and sometimes, network is unreachable, of course, because I disabled Wi-Fi. Still nothing? Or am I doing it? Okay, yeah, that was silly me then. So you can get information about Java processes running in a system with a single command. Is it really that useful? Yes. Why? Because you will only see the Java processes that belong to your user, or if you're root to everything else. If you have something fancy running your Java, that might just make it easier to troubleshoot, because that will tell you that if your applications show up with that, then it means that, well, at least JVM managed to well boot and put a special file that it communicates itself to in a proper place. That's if your applications don't show up with JPS, something is wrong with the JVM, of course, and there can be situations in which PS shows that Java is running and JPS shows nothing. That means that you might have a problem. jar for examining contents of jar files. You probably know that, and you probably know that jar file is just a zip file. So, do we have a jar here? Well, we can find a jar file in. Oh, let's just go to Maven. Why you misbehave? Okay, that's all on the screen. So you can do jar -tf of a jar. What is important with that is it will give you the list of class files inside the jar. Why is that important? Because if you were fighting against a class not found error, or it might happen that the jar file that you are using doesn't have a particular class inside. Of course you shouldn't, but reality is being cruel, and sometimes jar files that you download from the internet actually don't have what they are supposed to. So sometimes you have to look and again, trust but verify. Moving on, you know PMAP. Who uses PMAP? 1, 2, 3, 5 people. Yay. So Java, because we're in the Java land, we can use JMAP. It's 2015 now, so most operating systems would have a version of PMAP that should work with Java, but I'm saying should. And JMap is something that's specific, well, very specifically done for Java. What it does is you can. Those are the options. You can print a heap summary. So let's do exactly that. I come prepared. I have a piece of software that will just have a loop running in the background, so I can have a process that can be a victim for our introspections. Oh. Of course. Silly me. So somebody could say, yes, how can we examine the memory contents of a Java process? Well, of course, we have to take a heap dump, and then we have to buy an expensive profiler or do something strange. Actually, no. The basic tool that will give you some information about that is, is that you can look. The information available by default is pretty basic, but you at least can see if the memory is being consumed by something that looks odd. Of course, you need to know what's happening in your application, but that's a different story. So let's, JMap, because that's what we want to do. And I have a cheat sheet, of course, but let's do it differently. Let's do what they say in here. We can do that. JMap minus all the things, and what happened? Now we have a heap dump. With a heap dump, we can use another tool called JHat. Who here has heard of JHat? 2 people. So JHat is something that will look at a heap dump and launch an HTTP server through which you can browse this heap and examine that. So you pointed at a file. So JHat heap bin. Yay. We have some things running on the port 7000. Let's see what happens on the port 7000 then. We have a pretty basic interface, but because this interface is pretty basic, it means it will run very well with your links, with your curl, with your everything else. This, we can see navigate it by clicking. That's pretty boring. That's nothing really fancy. What I really wanted to show you here is we have something called object query language available to us, and an object query language is a language through which you can. It's like it's like SQL for heaps, for heap dumps. So you can select, you can express, you can do queries that can analyze your heap, so that you can because why would you not? And see, we can see which strings are longer than 100. This gets really interesting if your application is doing something strange, or you want to do some more interesting queries. Because, sorry for that. Just be gone Outlook. So yeah, you can query your objects, and you can actually inspect the values of fields inside, and you can use that with OQL. And also, because this interface is pretty light, you can launch it somewhere. The caveat, of course, if your production machines have a lot of RAM, the heap dump can be large, which means you might need a powerful computer to be able to examine the dump, and it's sometimes a query might take some time, but still, the fact that you can query in a language about the contents of your heap means that finding and troubleshooting memory sometimes becomes much easier, because navigating, a memory graph with clicking is not really my favorite cup of tea. So, moving forward, stack traces. How do you take a stack trace in Java? JStack, yes. Somebody said JStack. I've heard Tomek say something like that, and I saw a hand. So you probably wanted to say the same. Well, you can do kill -3. That's a casual way to do a stack trace. However, the caveat with that, this will go to, you will not see it in the console that you execute it in. So in Java, you use JStack. So because, only 3 people knew about that, so this is what happens. We get stack traces for all the threads in a particular JVM, which means you will also see the GC threads, you will see the compiler threads in here. Of course, somebody had to be original, and the thread numbers are, in some of the tools they are in hex, in some of the tools they are in decimal. That's the convention of not following a convention, that's what it gives us. However, there is a caveat to here. Stack traces produced by JStack are not slice cut directly through all this all the threads. They can be like, they can look like somebody was trying to follow a snake. This is because the stack trace for a particular thread will be produced as at a save point. So it is important to remember, this can produce sometimes garbage output, but if something is spinning in a loop or something is being blocked on a particular monitor, it is a basic tool that can help you troubleshoot that. I know some people who are actually taking JStack dumps every couple of seconds at every single machine, and then if they see something not really behaving too well or something strange, unexpected in the data that comes from that, then they react. The question becomes, how can you put more information out there? What information do you or your programmers have that can be analyzed and visible through this tool? The answer is, well, in Java you can rename your threads. So if you can give your threads meaningful names, if a thread is processing a transaction, change the name of the thread for the time of when you are dealing with it to give the identifiers, then you can see that, well, a certain transaction is probably something that's failing. It has saved my life before, so I hope this is something, well, useful to you. So let's move on. JStack, yes, we know that, and quiz time and save points, but we know that. Now let's move to a really interesting tool. Who here has known of JStat? Wow, that's progress. Around 12 people in the audience. Let's do JStat. So by default, I should have it in my notes. Yep. So JPS to get a victim, and now we can do for. So we have to provide this magic options flag. The question is how do I know whether I should do -GC, whether I should do something else? The answer is all the options that are part of JStat options are somewhere in the JDK. Oh, as you know, OpenJDK is open source, so link to that is included in the presentation, so I will not ask you to read it right now. But again, something that people don't know is you can define your custom formats here. You can define an additional options file, which then you can use with JStat, which means I can go to my home directory, and there is a directory called JVMstat, and I can provide custom JStat options, which follow the very same format that you have seen before, but I have defined custom GC here. And now I can do JStat minus custom GC. And yes, the output is not really that awesome because, well, this is just a file that's trying to show you that you can create your custom formats here, but it's actually pretty useful, and you can use the file that I have visible in the background as an input. What options are available? How can you configure that? This is something that at least we find pretty, well, not pretty, extremely useful, because you can put a lot of information out there. You can, oh, sorry for that. You can put a lot of information out there, and I need the network, so, well, Hangouts is being bad to me. And then you can automate that, feed that data into some analysis mechanism, and, well, profit, hopefully. It wouldn't all be that interesting without one next thing. There is a tool called JStatD. So JStatD is a daemon that you launch in a remote system, and then using JStatD, you can connect from your local machine to a JStatD running elsewhere. So JStat options, we've went through JStatD. This is a diagram that shows what I'm talking about. So instead of connecting directly to a JVM on a remote host, which sometimes might not really be possible, you might have a bastion or some kind of an access server that will connect, that will forward your connection. So you can expose JVMs via JStatD and then connect to that JStatD and then collect the information from your, I don't know, application pool and see what's happening with all those, well, JVMs. Is that useful? To us, yes, because sometimes you can't really connect to your production server from your development desktop. Does it provide some overhead? Unfortunately, yes, but the overhead is what I would say negligible. However, it's still there, and sometimes there are situations in which it might not work. For example, if the JVM is frozen or something happened that it doesn't respond to anything, because the way JStatD operates is it has to talk to a running JVM. So if it means it has to talk to a JVM, it means that the JVM has to respond. If the JVM is not responding because, for example, GC threads has gone haywire, then you might have a problem. But then you will know that you have a problem, which means you can win and fix it. And now, JCMD. So since I think JDK 8, maybe a later update to 7, Oracle introduced a command called JCMD. The idea is, because I've shown you a couple of tools before, instead of having 7 or 8 or 10, let's have all the features available under a single command line option. That's the tool that is supposed to do that is called JCMD, and the way it works is, this works, good. So JCMD, by default, it does, the default output is similar to JPS. So minus help. So we can do JCMD. Let's use the cheat sheet. Oh, of course. Why you not? Something is wrong. Maybe. Yay, it worked. So let's zoom in a bit. You can see some commands available. Why do I have to do that? In some JVMs, you can have more options. Some JVMs don't support all the things, and Oracle wanted to be future-proof, so allow JVMs to expose more and more options through the JCMD interface. So some older JVMs will not have all the options. Some of the newer ones, they should have more. This way, you can always ask the JVM, what can I do with you? So let's see this. I've gotten a heap histogram, which is exactly the same thing that we have previously done with JMap. And because it's exactly the same code being executed, as I told you, it's a replacement. So all the features that were previously available in the single command line tools are or should be available via JCMD. And the question is, what you could say, why am I showing you both? The answer is because you might be working on an older JVM and you might not have JCMD available to you just yet. And also because JCMD is being developed, which means that sometimes something either doesn't work or is not fully available in there. It's work in progress. Things change there. So the old binaries, on the other hand, are pretty stable. If you use JMX, you probably know, you probably already have some tools available to you that can interact with JMX. I personally would say JMX SH works to me okay, but this is, well, something completely up to you. You should probably check that out. And who here knows about Visual GC? Sorry, Visual VM. So there is a couple of hands, around 15 in the audience, so that's more progress. Well, let's see it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So Visual VM, that's a tool that's available, a graphical tool that's available in all JDK since JDK 6 version update something. What it does, you can connect to an existing JVM or to remote JVMs exposed with JSTD. That's why I have shown you before. So we should be able to connect to that. And we can see all the information that we have previously seen via command line in a graphical form. Of course, clicking doesn't really scale that well, but if you're examining a very particular system, you have a visual tool available to you. There is something interesting in here. This supports plugins. So if you go to plugins, there is a very useful plugin available that people have to unfortunately install because it's not available it's not enabled by default. It's called Visual GC. It has to be supported by a particular JVM, of course, but you can, let's connect to the same VM we're running. You can actually see what's how GC is behaving, how full the pools memory pools are. If you're not an expert, or if you need, if you want to talk about the behavior or just observe behavior, images are usually worth a lot. So you can grab those images, you can examine them whenever you want. And this is the exactly same data that we have seen previously accessed with other tools, just presented in a visual form. Of course, those graphs will look differently depending on the GC algorithm that you're using. You also get stack traces. You can also see some basic monitoring for a particular JVM. You can see all the options. You can see the system properties. So pretty useful tool. You can also take a heap dump and examine that. So let's click heap dump, and here again you have the object query language available to you. Similarly as before, you can also load a heap dump. So if you prefer a clicky interface to a basic website, you can examine your heap contents in here. Which tool is better? Which way should you analyze your heap dumps? That's totally up to you. I just wanted to show you that the options are available, and it might be useful. I hope it will be useful to you. Do you have any questions now? Because you're waving that the 10 minutes is only available to me. Tomek, good.
1 second, please wait.
How many times have you seen people script these besides yourself?
Quite often. I've seen a lot of people script this, especially if for some strange corporate reason they cannot buy tools like New Relic or any other analytics solutions. Because having some insight into the JVM is useful. If you're a developer, or if you just need something for that particular machine and your tool of choice that is already installed there doesn't support it, I find it you can get extra information with those.
Would you actually have any equivalents for IBM JVM?
I don't use IBM JVMs, so I don't know. I don't know what happens in there. Questions in the back?
1 second.
I have a quick question about JStack.
Sure.
JStack also provides an option to see TID and NID, which is, I believe, thread ID and native ID. So on Windows and Linux, I didn't have any problems with those because I can match Java thread ID with native process ID to determine which process, for example, consumes all of my CPU. But on Mac, I have a problem because I can't do this. So I just tried to Google it once I faced this problem, but wasn't successful. Is there any way to determine in Mac which particular native process ID which I can get via, for example, top, and match it to particular JStack Java thread?
I'm sorry to say that, but I don't know. I use Mac as my desktop, and then all my, series applications do happen on Linux, which, as you say, there it makes sense.
Okay.
Hi, a question about good practices in examining really large heaps.
Good practices examining really large heaps. Wow. Anything in particular?
For example, Elasticsearch with a heap about 32 gigabytes.
Well, it's
Heap Dump takes for 2 hours or so.
I think that we can talk about it a bit later outside, because this is a huge topic, and it could be a talk of its own.
Okay, thanks.
So no more questions, then it means that we are done. Thanks guys for coming. No, not yet. Tomek. Shoot.
Have you actually tried how much, what is the largest scripting that you've been doing with the Java query language?
What is the largest script?
Yep.
The largest I've done was 20-something lines.
And on how large heap it operated?
That was operating on heaps of 8 and 16 gigs. We were examining HBase, something running inside HBase, and it was misbehaving.
And how long it took?
It was the results. The results weren't instant, but it was it was reasonably interactive.
Okay, thank you.
Concerning the GC log, you can configure it, the level and the verbosity of it ad hoc, like whatever you want. But there is a great overhead. I mean, it can be really verbose. Can you? What are the best practices?
Well, yes, it can be verbose, and also if, for example, I know of some people that have been logging GC to a NAS, and then because GC logs do happen while your GCs are happening. So you might run into a situation in which the actual time of the GC log being accessed greatly contributes to your stop the world time. So, we want to see Mr. Looper. I would at least recommend doing print GC details and print GC date stamps. The rest is up to you. I don't know what other tools do you have running in there, but at least that will tell you what is when the GCs are happening. Of course, you can add distributions, yes, but I think we can. It depends on how you get this data. In terms of reducing latency or best practices for that. This hasn't been a problem to me personally, so I just want to have the GC log so I can later analyze them for anomalies. And I prefer, even if the overhead is small, the overhead to me is small. I prefer to pay it because it's the amount of the information is usually much more valuable. And I think we can talk about it in more detail after. Yay.
What do you use to monitor GC? Because printing, it's okay, but then you need to monitor what's going on in your system. Visual GC is cool when you analyze, but it's not for monitoring.
Well, New Relic works. You can do CA have a good product that also you can launch it with the JVM as an agent, and it will monitor your application. I wholeheartedly can recommend this one. I haven't seen all the other tools that are out there, but performance monitoring tools are, there is a couple of them on the market. If you have one, just enable that. I would expect it to provide some level of support of that. But then, if you have any specific needs, I can say I'm pretty happy with what CA provides. Okay, no more hands. Thank you very much for coming. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you very much.